Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Declan, and if you enjoy talking about movies in any way, shape or form, you're going to feel right at home here. In today's video we're going to be doing a brand new ranking video, and in this particular case we're going to be ranking all 6 Mission Impossible movies from the worst to the best. So let's jump into it. So the Mission Impossible series is a fantastic action series that has been around in Hollywood since the late 90s, and this is a franchise that I am deeply invested in. I love this series, I love the characters, I always enjoy the story and the action. They're just always really fantastic blockbuster movies that I always look forward to, and we are currently looking forward to Mission Impossible 7 and 8, which are being filmed back to back currently. Well, not currently, they have had to halt production of course at the moment, but they were filming back to back, similarly to Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, and it does seem likely that Mission Impossible 7 and 8 will be the final movies in the franchise until they inevitably get rebooted. But before we get to those films, we do have 6 other ones to talk about and rank them accordingly. Starting off at the very bottom of the list, in number 6 we have Mission Impossible, the one that started it all, and I know this is going to be actually a bit of a hot take actually to have this one right at the bottom, but for me personally, Mission Impossible is a really good movie, it's really enjoyable, it's a great time, and it was definitely a great starting point for this series. Of course you have Brian De Palma, a very well regarded director, coming in to handle this, and for me the original Mission Impossible is really exciting in comparison to the rest of the series because it's a really interesting film in how it's shot and how it's done. Especially because there's really not that much action in it. Like, there is action, but there's not as much, and it's not as big and bombastic as the franchise gets as it goes on. It's a lot more smaller scale, and it's really interesting to look at that when you look at the other films in the franchise. Of course, this film did covers iconic moments like Tom Cruise running away from the exploding water tank, and it also has Tom Cruise obviously suspending from the air, the incredibly iconic shot there. My only problem with the original Mission Impossible is I do feel like this film is a bit boring at times, and I feel like the espionage side of it does kind of hold it back from being the super fun films that they probably should be. And I understand obviously this was the first film in the franchise, they're still finding their footing, and I think that as that, it does a great job. I just feel like in comparison to the other films of the franchise, this is the one I want to return to the least. Coming in at number 5, we have Mission Impossible 2. Now, this movie is the most likely, bottom of most people's lists. People aren't really a huge fan of Mission Impossible 2, and I understand if you want to put this at the bottom of your list, I completely get that. But for me, the reason why I have Mission Impossible 2 above the first film is just because I think this is more fun. Like, yeah, it's a bit more dumb, it's a bit more silly, but I think it's really enjoyable. I mean, you look at the opening action sequence for one, and the action sequences in the movie as a whole, you have Tom Cruise climbing a cliff at the very beginning, and just the action sequences overall. Of course, this film was directed by John Woo, famous Chinese filmmaker, and you can just tell this was directed by John Woo. It has all of his sensibilities throughout it. It has the doves, the slow-mo, it's just all there on display. And what I really like about this movie as well is that I just think it has this this sense of fun, and it does have this almost sort of Asian martial arts style of cinema vibe for it, which I think really works for the Mission Impossible series. I mean, it's weird because it is a complete outlier for the rest of the series, but it feels really cool in this, and it further emphasizes why I thought the Mission Impossible franchise was so cool originally, which is that each film is by a different director, because each one gets such a different style, and this one feels so distinctly John Woo's film. They do give Tom Cruise a ridiculous haircut in this one, but that aside, I do think that Mission Impossible 2 just has a lot of really good stuff going for it. And also the score from Hans Zimmer is absolutely fantastic in this movie. I love the score. I had the chance to actually hear that live in the World of Hans Zimmer concert late last year. Absolutely perfect hearing that live, and just hearing it in the movie again, it feels amazing. There are some negatives though. I do think the villain played by Doug Ray Scott isn't exactly great. It's kind of a sad situation for Doug Ray Scott. I mean, he did this movie, so he actually couldn't do X-Men. He was actually originally cast as Wolverine, then he had to do this movie, and then he couldn't do it, and now he stars on Batwoman, so I mean, I don't really know what to say about that. But I feel like the villain, just not exactly the best. And also, while I do enjoy that this film does have a completely different sense of style and tone to some of the other films, it is a bit dumb at times, and it is definitely a departure from the first film. Like, you could put these two side by side and they could be completely different Tom Cruise action franchises. Like, you could not tell that these are the same movie. Like, it's kind of ridiculous, but overall, I enjoy it, and I do want to revisit this one a lot more than I did the first movie, so it goes here. Coming in at number 4, we have Mission Impossible 3. Now, Mission Impossible 3 is a movie I love. I think that this is, again, the Mission Impossible movies, they're all so distinct from one another because each one has a different director, and this one introduced the world, really, to J.J. Abrams. I mean, before this, he was doing a lot of work on TV, he did Lost, he did Alias, and Tom Cruise saw those shows and wanted to bring J.J. Abrams in to the franchise and gave him his first feature directorial debut. And this film definitely feels like a J.J. Abrams movie. You can see his style and sensibility throughout it. It's very flashy, it's very well made, it's very well shot, it looks very nice. But also, what I really like about Mission Impossible 3 is this is by far the darkest movie in the franchise. This film goes really dark, it feels dark, it looks dark, it feels kind of grimy, and it does feel like a bit more of a more grittier espionage style film with some really brutal action throughout in comparison to the other films. And again, it makes it feel a bit more unique because that dark sensibility is very much woven throughout. And Mission Impossible 3 does give us the best villain in the franchise in the form of Philip Seymour Hoffman. His character was driven and determined and genuinely scary. Like the scene that opens the movie and then when you see how it actually gets to that point, his villain is just absolutely bone-chilling. Like, I was so... When I first watched this movie a few years ago, I was terrified of this guy, and he is by far the most memorable and most scary villain of the series. It's a real shame what happens, obviously, to Philip Seymour Hoffman. Of course, he was a fantastic actor, and this is genuinely one of my favourite roles from him. I think his villain was just so memorable and easily stands out. Also, this movie just got a great cast. It introduces us to Michelle Monaghan's character. It also introduces Aaron Paul's character. It also introduces Simon Pegg's character. There's a lot of really big things that happen in this movie that really propel the franchise forward, and it does make it a very memorable movie throughout. In at number 3, we have Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. Now, I know this is, again, kind of like my first movie. This is a little bit of a hot take. I think this movie would be a little bit higher on most people's lists. But for me, Ghost Protocol, I mean, to be honest, as we move into this top 3, even the top 4, including Mission Impossible 3, these movies are pretty much interchangeable. Like, they're so close at this point. But Ghost Protocol, to me, is a film I actually have a very personal connection with because most of this movie, or a majority of this film, was actually shot in Dubai. I used to live in Dubai, and I was actually in Dubai when they were filming this movie. I've actually been into the Burj Khalifa, which is the tallest tower in the world that Tom Cruise scales in this film. And I was actually in that around the time they were shooting, and I remember they had the director's chair there for Brad Bird, and they had photos and stuff, like early photos that they released of Tom Cruise while they were filming, and it was just a really special connection because I was like, oh wow, I feel like I've kind of been a part of the making of this movie in some way. But Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol is just the epitome of what this franchise is. Like, it's just perfect all the way through. I love it. The only complaint I have with this movie is the villain. The villain is very weak, maybe the weakest villain in the series. He's just a bit, yeah, I don't know. He's just not memorable, he's not very cool, he's not very interesting, he's just, you know, generic Russian bad guy. But the rest of the film is great. All the locations we go to, I like where it starts out in Moscow. Again, we go to Dubai, which was just amazing, and then it even ends in India. The India location is beautiful. We also get to be, you know, bring Simon Pegg really into the forefront. We also get the introduction of Jane Carter, played by Paula Patton, who I wish they brought her back. Like, I don't know why she's in this one movie and not in the rest of the franchise, because she's so good in this, and I loved her character, and I don't know why they never brought her back. So for Mission Impossible 7 and 8, if you're coming up with some ideas, bring back Paula Patton, because I miss her. But also, I think it was really cool what they did, bringing in Jeremy Renner as Agent Brandt. He was, of course, supposed to be Tom Cruise's replacement for the series, and then Tom Cruise was like, well, I'm mental, so I'm not going to stop. So that was kind of sidelined, but still, a really cool addition. I liked his character, and the action sequences in this were phenomenal. Of course, the scene of Tom Cruise scaling the Burj Khalifa was absolutely amazing. Tom Cruise is absolutely phenomenal throughout this entire franchise as Ethan Hunt. The way he's able to just do all these stunts himself, and again, the fact that he actually climbed the Burj Khalifa himself, absolutely insane. And, you know, as I said, I used to live in Dubai. I've been up that tower. It is high. It's really high. So, like, I do not envy Tom Cruise and his stunt work throughout this film and throughout the entire franchise, because, again, that is one tall building. But I think that Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, I know this is a real fan favourite for many. And again, I adore this movie. I love this film. I've watched it many, many times. But right now, this is where it sits on my list. And my runner-up goes to Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Now, Rogue Nation, I thought, took what Ghost Protocol did and just did it even better. For me, as you can tell, but you know, as you can already see from my ranking, the Mission Impossible franchise for me, honestly, basically gets better with each and every film. And I think that this is a really interesting case, because I think that this film of Rogue Nation, it introduced us to Christopher McQuarrie, who of course went on to become the kind of staple Mission Impossible director. As I said, Mission Impossible has always swapped its directors with each and every film, and I loved that about the franchise, the fact that each film feels distinctly different. but they've really found their footing now with Christopher McQuarrie, because he was brought in to do this film and he was brilliant. He really nailed it. I think that the introduction of Rebecca Ferguson's character was a real just for the franchise. Like, when she was brought in, it was like, yes, that is the exact type of character we needed for this franchise. It was the exact sort of character that Ethan Hunt needed on the team, and she was great. I loved her character throughout this. Also, the villain, played by Sean Harris, up there with Philip Seymour Hoffman, probably the second best villain of the series. Absolutely fantastic. He's really good in this. Again, scary, intimidating, and he's not exactly a big presence either. He's kind of just very meticulous and silent, and that's the kind of villain he is, and it works super well. The action sequences in this, phenomenal. I love the car chase, I love the motorcycle chase, I love the plane scene at the beginning of the film, which Tom Cruise actually hung himself off the side of a plane because he's mental, and this film just has so much going for it. It's so much fun. This film introduces the Syndicate as well, which was the original villain of the TV series back in the day. They brought them into the movies. That was really cool. I just think this film just has so much going on for it. And again, it takes everything that was great about Ghost Protocol and kind of brings it up even more. And I just love Rogue Nation. I remember when I saw this in the cinema, I was absolutely enthralled by it. I couldn't wait. And honestly, this stayed up as like one of my best movies of 2015, pretty much until Star Wars came out. So yeah, I was very, very impressed with Rogue Nation, and I thought this movie was just enough to hit that sweet spot. But my number one spot has to go to Mission Impossible Fallout, the most recent in the series, and this was the first time that the series ever brought back a director, which was, as I mentioned, Christopher McQuarrie. He brought him back to make this film, and Fallout is just phenomenal. Like, this is a staple of what action movies in Hollywood should be like. I know people talk about John Wick as far as like Hollywood movies and action in Hollywood movies, but this is like on the level of something like Mad Max Fury Road. Like, this movie is so good. The action is unbelievable. Like, the helicopter chase in this movie, the fact that that is entirely practical and that's all real, that's Tom Cruise actually flying a helicopter. It's when you really get that in your head where you realise, wow, like, the action in this movie is unbelievable. Also, the villain, Henry Cavill, in this movie, brilliant. Like, Henry Cavill's so good in this. Again, one of the best villains. I loved him in this movie. I remember when he came in, I was a bit like, oh, how's this going to go? Because I really like Henry Cavill. I thought he was cool as Superman. I was like, I wonder how this is going to go. And then when he comes out in this movie, he's just insane. Like, he is a powerhouse. Like, he cannot be stopped in this movie, and I love it. And I wonder if they were going to bring him back, because he's really, really cool. And again, the director returning was something that was very interesting. This movie, even though it is the same director as Rogue Nation, it does feel a bit different. This film takes a bit more of a Mission Impossible 3 direction, goes a bit darker, and even when you look at the color palette of the movie, it's a bit darker. It's not quite as bright and vibrant as Rogue Nation was. So again, you can feel that darker tone a little bit, and that was really cool and interesting. And even the cast, like, they brought back Michelle Monaghan in this movie, who we hadn't seen since Mission Impossible 3. I couldn't believe they brought her back. I never thought we'd see her again, but there she was. And also Sean Harris from Mission Impossible 5 shows up in this movie as well, and he has a really cool role to play. Ving Rhames gets given a much bigger role in this movie, as he did in Rogue Nation, which was really nice to see. We got Alec Baldwin in this movie, who had a really cool role, Angela Bassett as well. This movie just has like everything you want in the Mission Impossible movie, and it's just there. Oh my god, and the Halo jump scene. How could I forget about the Halo jump scene? Tom Cruise actually did a Halo jump out of this movie. He did it like loads of times, and he just jumps out of a plane. It's insane. Like, as you could tell by the way I'm talking, I'm so excited about this movie. Like, it's just so good, and I genuinely believe this is one of the best action movies of the decade, like top 5. And for me, when I came out of this movie the first time, I was like, that's why I love action movies. That is why I love cinema like this, because it's so exciting and it gets you so involved. And again, the score from Lorne Barth in this movie as well, up there with Hans Zimmer's score, so good. I was just so pleased with this movie when it came out, and I couldn't believe I had just walked out of, yet again, the best Mission Impossible movie of the series thus far, because they just keep knocking it out of the park time and time again, making each movie better than the last. But there you have it, guys. There's my ranking of all 6 Mission Impossible movies. I will be doing an updated version of this list in a couple of years' time when Mission Impossible 7 and 8 both come out. But make sure you leave your list in the comment section down below. How would you rank the movies? Again, this is just my personal opinion, of course. It's not the correct one. Just let me know your opinion in the comments down below. How would you personally rank the Mission Impossible movies? Just leave that in the comments down below, and let's have a great discussion about it as always. And if you want to see more movie reviews and movie-related videos and movie rankings and everything else in between, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any uploads from me, and I hope to see you guys again next time.